Oh, okay, yeah. What's up, y'all?
Hi.
Hey, what's
Hey.
up? What's up? This is Richie Michaels, the U.S. National Brand Ambassador for Uncle Nearest. I'm joined today by, I'm sure everyone out there knows, our beautiful Sailor. Say hello to everyone, Sailor. Come on.
Aw. Hi, everybody.
But not everyone out there will know one of our newest members of the team, Z, Zalika. Do you want to introduce yourself to everyone out
Yay.
there? Woo!
I
You
would
joined
love
us tonight.
to. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Zalika. I'm the newest brand ambassador, brand steward for Texas and based out of Houston. So I just actually started pretty much like last week. So I'm kind of just here to hang out and have a little fun with you.
We
Thanks
are
for having
Yeah,
me, guys.
so excited to have you. We're so excited to have you, of course, with the brand. And you have so much energy, and you're so positive and lovely. And we got to chat yesterday, and we had such a good chat. And also, I just wanted everyone to meet you that watches us and all of our viewers. And we're really excited to have you on board. And I know you're going to kick butt in Texas.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I was like watching you guys before I even got hired. So I was like, cool, look at me now.
right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So, Sailor, what are we talking about tonight? What's going on?
Well, first of all, welcome back, Richie. It's been a while. I don't know how that happened. Time doesn't
I
exist
know.
in this weird world. I feel
Yeah,
like
right.
it's been like March for 8 years, and it's also been like 2 seconds. I don't even know what's
Right.
going on anymore. But I'm so excited that you're back with us. And tonight we thought so. Richie, you've done for us. You kind of walked us through a virtual tasting of Uncle Nearest, and you did your fun jelly bean trick. And if you guys want to see that, and I have to tell you,
It
like I
blows,
yes,
blows people's
I'm
minds.
feeling that from you.
I
Just so you
haven't
know.
seen this.
Oh, it's really cool. So you can go on our YouTube channel, which is called Pound the Rock, and you can all of these broadcasts live there as videos. So just go ahead and scroll through, and you'll see it. I mean, I've done chocolates, fruits, and nuts to show the differences, but the jelly beans thing, very cool. So that was
It
fun.
works so beautifully.
It
It's
really
so
does.
beautiful.
It really was. Chastity and I were like, "What? Just when you
You
think
know,
you know."
I've done a lot of tastings in my time, and it never ever ceases to amaze people. It always blows people's minds when you do
Yes.
that little trick. So
Yeah.
anyone viewing out there who hasn't seen the little jelly bean trick, go back and watch our tasting of the Uncle Nearest expressions we did a few weeks ago, and
It was a
check
few
it
months
out. And
ago now.
yeah, it was, wasn't it?
That's what I
It's like a
mean.
time warp. It's a time
I
warp.
know. I know.
So go back and
Yeah.
watch it, and it will blow your mind. You'll love it. It's brilliant.
Yes.
So
So the other thing that's really cool that Richie does, and I have not had a chance to see you do this or do this with you. And I was going to get an opportunity to do it because we were supposed to be traveling together a little bit, and then COVID happened. That was the end of that. But so you do something called the truth about the Lincoln County process because most people just really don't understand it. So, and Zalika and I talked about this yesterday too. And I think it's like the number one misnomer, maybe, right? In Tennessee whiskey, you're not understanding, well, Tennessee whiskey is bourbon plus, we say it's an American whiskey, but what the heck? And how do you, you have such a great way of explaining it and making it interesting. So that's what I asked you if you would do that with us tonight.
it's just always been one of my, I guess, pet peeves in the whiskey industry that that folks associate Tennessee whiskey and the Lincoln County process with somehow in their minds it's been associated with being an inferior type of whiskey production, and so it's just one of my goals and quests in my whiskey life is to expel that in people's minds and let them know, because it really isn't at all. It's actually quite a little bit superior, and a little bit it's harder. It's a harder process. It's
harder,
a more expensive process.
takes longer.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just one of my things that just like gets me when
I love it. I know you're so. I love your passion for it. It's like he brings the fire.
I'll tell you my other ones too, Sayla. I'll tell you my other ones too. My other ones are my pet peeves are the association of the sour mash process with inferiority. Because again, that is something that is very common with consumers, that they, for some reason, have developed their opinion of what the sour mash process is and associate it with inferiority for some reason.
Yeah, they say,
And so
I
that's
don't like sour mash. And I'm like,
yeah.
Where are they getting this from?
So I'm like,
Yeah,
who
it's,
knows?
Do you know, and then my third one, just before I jump into that, my third one is the term blended as well. That's my other pet peeve, is that people associate the term blended with inferiority as well.
Right.
And so those are my three big
Canadian
ones.
whiskey did that. That's Canadian whiskey's fault. Sorry, guys. But it is. Because blending is so much more difficult. It is such a, you have to have so many skills to be a blender.
Right.
Blending consistently, like I'm so impressed with blenders. So I'm there with you, big time.
Yes.
One of mine is Nashville.
This is episode one. This is episode one of Richie's pet peeves.
I love it. I'm here for it.
So today, yes, the Lincoln County process, and then we can do other ones in the future about sour mash and blending as well, because they're all just that's big too.
Please. That one gets
these are all very, very complex production processes that through marketing and through stuff like Canadian whiskey is a great point, Sailor. That's one thing that people have really taken the word blending and associated with inferiority. And the reason they've done that with Canadian whiskey is because by law you only have to be 91.09% whiskey to be labeled as Canadian whiskey. So the other 8.91% of the bottle can be colorings, flavorings, and neutral grain spirit. So that's why a lot of times people associate the blending inferiority as really has come through Canadian whiskey. That's a great point.
Yeah.
So yes. Yeah. So but you know what? Before we get started on Tennessee whiskey, we've been sat here. We got on 15 minutes early, and we've been sat here, and you've been looking at my beautiful case display back here and not asked me what this is.
I was waiting till we went live. So you're fancy pants already in your background. What is that?
Well, check this out right here. This might be one of the most special pieces that we have. So right now, so in this case, this is a first bottle release of all three of our expressions in this case right here. Yeah, isn't that cool? Wow. Yeah, so well, I have them. So so this is a first bottle release of the 1884, the 1856, and then this is the US 1 1820. So which technically wasn't our first single barrel, but it was our first American single barrel.
So that 1884 is not from batch one though.
This is from the first batch that we did right here. Yeah.
What? How do you get what?
Look at this VIP over here.
I know your address. I may be taking the card room.
So I put this case together, and it's going to go on display in Wynn's Steakhouse, which is a 5, 6, 7 star steakhouse. You know, one of those amazing places that you just dream of going on a dinner date. You know, so they're going to put this on display in Wynn's Steakhouse.
So do you have like a special suitcase that you handcuff to your wrist when you carry it around? Is it insured separately? I hope. You should. That better be insured separately. Shoot.
I know that's a really nice piece. That's a one of a kind piece right there. After it leaves Wynn's, we should probably take it to the distillery and put it on display there.
We can't do it like the moon rocks, and it can just visit all of us for a little bit.
Yeah.
Remember when the moon? I'm dating myself. Remember when the moonwalks went around? Moon rocks to all the schools, and it would come to you, and you go in your library for like a week or something. Do you remember that in the 80s?
I remember. I'm old too, Sailor.
I know. I just dated myself. So like, like, what?
Sorry, I'm like, what are y'all talking about?
I know,
Sorry.
Hey guys, before we get started,
okay,
can we show our viewers our new commercial?
I feel like we have to.
Oh, wow. Yes.
You guys want to see it?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so I'm going to do the share screen thing. So bear with me for a second so that I get it right. And then we check the volume ahead of time. So just let us know in the chat if for some reason you can't hear it, but I think the volume's good. So I'm going to go ahead and share that now. So this commercial will be rolled out throughout the whole country. So this is really exciting, you guys. Okay, here we go. Hopefully I do this right. Okay.
Uncle Nearest is the smoothest, most award-winning premium American whiskey. Looks like the world is falling in love. Chances are you will too.
I love
How about that?
What do you think, guys?
Oh man, I think that we're gonna get a lot of attention from that commercial. I think it's gonna be awesome. I'm excited.
Uh-oh, sorry. It starts playing the next video. I thought I had closed it already. I'm like, what is that music?
No, I love
it. You can see that video if you want to watch it again. I'll go ahead and put the links in the comments because it's on the Uncle Nearest YouTube channel. So you can watch that video and you're going to see it on your television very soon because it was first released in Detroit, correct? The home of Motown.
Love it.
The home of Motown. And Seda, can you tell everyone why that song that's in the commercial is so special?
So, I know a lot of people Google Fawn Weaver, as I do, and wiki her, and and you can quickly find out something that she really doesn't talk about a lot is her family. Her father is Motown royalty, and he actually sang that song. And it's a recording that so there's a really great article we all just posted today on social media, and it's posted right on our Facebook page. So when we're done with the broadcast, you can read it. It was one of the most expensive vinyl records ever sold, and it has not been on the airwaves in the United States until now. And that's Fawn's dad singing. It's so cool.
So cool.
How cool is that?
I love it. It's really
so
awesome.
Cool.
Like as if the song enough isn't feel good enough by itself, and then that's where it came from.
Exactly.
Can't make stuff like that up.
I know, it's so cool. It's so cool. When we're blessed to be able to have the rights to use some of these songs, because her father's catalog is huge. So what a blessing as well to help share the legacy of Uncle Nearest. So it's really exciting. Really exciting.
I love it.
All right.
Very cool. Yes, you're ready to talk Lincoln County process. Let's talk Tennessee whiskey.
Do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So I do this presentation every now and again. It's the actual presentation I do is very production based. So I don't do it very often unless I know I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of geeks like us. So so I don't get to do it very often. But today we're just going to do a little bit more of a casual version, just because we don't want to get into doing slideshows and stuff like that. We want to have fun, so we're just gonna do a little bit more of a casual version. But like I said, one of the reasons that spurred me to talk about the Lincoln County process so much is that that kind of feeling that consumers have that for some reason Tennessee whiskey and the Lincoln County process creates an inferior product. And so just doing a little research, I wanted to find why and where that came from. And so I spoke to some of my my whiskey historian friends. One of my good buddies, Larry Rice, here in
Can't hear you, Betty.
And
there you go. Your sound's back.
yeah, sorry. I was just saying, I did a little research to find where that came from, and it really seems like it's a very marketing and advertising based thing that's caused this. And so if you go back to the
He's losing you. We need him to tell this because I definitely can't tell this.
yeah.
Not yet.
Am I here? Hello.
Oh no, we can't hear you either.
Can you hear me? I can't even see myself now.
Oh, we can't see you.
Okay, can you? Oh, what is going on here? So let me just talk through this bit real quick until we get to the first little thing to show. So it seems like it's more of a marketing and advertising based thing. If you go back to the 60s and look at a lot of the direction that Tennessee Whiskey took in their advertising and marketing compared to the direction that Kentucky Bourbon took with their advertising and marketing, they took two very, very different directions.
Right.
Tennessee Whiskey, which was primarily Jack Daniel, were taking the route that they wanted to be a product that can be enjoyed by everybody. They wanted their beautiful whiskey to be shared with the world, and so they did their marketing and their advertising to geared towards that. It was available for everyone. It was always reasonably priced, but never on special. And the Kentucky Bourbon really took the other route as an industry. They took the route that they wanted to position themselves as superior, position themselves as the ultimate luxury product. And so a lot of their advertising and marketing would reference that, and it would be in scenarios where you would see pictures of beautiful, lavish parties at big mansion houses, and people hanging out with their horses and their horse racing friends, and wearing beautiful suits and just looking very lavish. One of the most iconic advertisements in the bourbon world was one that Maker's Mark put out in the late 60s, and their slogan was, "It looks expensive because it is." That was the slogan they put on their billboards and in their magazine commercials. And so that just epitomizes the route that Kentucky Bourbon was trying to take with their advertising and marketing. They wanted to be superior. They wanted to be seen as that. Whereas Tennessee Whiskey wanted to share their beautiful whiskey with the world and make it accessible to everyone. And so those marketing routes are really what positioned the two different types of whiskey the way that they are generally positioned in consumers' minds today. And that thinking, it gets passed down from generation to generation. It takes a long time for people's thought processes and people's views on things to change. It takes generations. So now where consumers are becoming more educated, they're becoming more interested in education, so they are wanting to learn more. And as people are learning more, they're finding out, wow, this process that is so quintessential to Tennessee whiskey that I thought made it inferior, it really doesn't. It actually makes it a little bit superior, and it makes it a little bit better. And so that is what we, as a team at Uncle Nearest and as a team across the entire Tennessee whiskey industry, are really capitalizing on this much elevated level of education today to try and dispel those myths that have been put in consumers' minds for all of those decades before this. So that's where we are today. Yes. So one really interesting thing, because I get asked this question a lot, and it seems to come up on a lot of message boards and blogs and stuff, is Tennessee whiskey bourbon, what's the connection? Can one be the other? And there seems to be just endless arguments in whiskey groups about this exact subject. And so that's another thing that is really kind of nice, just to clean up for people when we do these presentations. So Sailor, if you could pull up the TTB definitions.
Okay.
Of whiskey.
You got it. All right, I'm going to do a share screen again.
And I'm actually going to jump out and jump back in because my stream has been...
Okay. All right. Okay. So we'll see. Let's see. Can you guys see that? Or what am I sharing?
Yes, I see. Hold on.
Let's see.
So
yeah, that's okay. So Richie's
Hopefully, I am
Perfect.
back. Okay,
back. Okay.
There you are.
So, okay. So I'm gonna. There you are. You're there. You're back again. So I gotta do this. Okay.
You know who
here
it
we go.
was? You know who it was? It was Rob Beatty from the Kentucky Black Bourbon Guild. Kept calling me while I'm trying to do a live stream, and
Does
and
he
cutting me
know I'm
off. So if you're watching, Rob, I got your phone call. I'll call you back. I'm busy.
Call him out.
All right.
Okay.
So okay. So I figured out how to do it. Which am I sharing the House bill number, or do you want the Chapter 4 class and type designation?
Yes, the chapter 4.
Chapter 4. You got
yes,
it.
pull
Okay.
that up. It is
Okay.
quite interesting. So
Okay.
there's a government agency who called the TTB, and they are the ones who govern a lot of what we have to follow in the alcohol industry, in the distilled spirits industry. And one of the biggest things that they do is labeling. So whenever you want to label your bottle of distilled spirit, you have to follow the guidelines that this government agency, the TTB, has set about. So almost every word you see on a bottle of distilled spirits has some kind of regulation behind it to be able to put that word on the label.
Right.
And the TTB outlines a lot of those guidelines in this document right here, and it's all available online, so anyone can go and look this up. But what is really interesting about this document is that there is all kinds of different types of whiskey outlined. Say, if you scroll down, you can see all the different types of whiskey that are outlined in this document. But one really interesting thing is that you will not see a category for Tennessee whiskey. You will see all kinds of different types of other whiskeys, but not Tennessee. So we got bourbon whiskey, rye whiskey, wheat whiskey, malt whiskey, rye malt whiskey, corn whiskey, straight bourbon whiskey, all kinds. The list goes on and on and on.
Everything.
There is, but no definition for Tennessee whiskey. So there is, with the TTB, the federal agency, they do not have a specific guideline for Tennessee whiskey. So how does that affect our industry? Well, what happened was that for a very, very long time, Tennessee whiskey was considered its own unique process. And then that got challenged. And so when that got challenged, we're going back to the 70s here. And so when that got challenged, Tennessee whiskey is its own unique product. The TTB didn't recognize that, and they said, you know what, it's not its own unique product. We don't need a category for it. And so it was just with the TTB, it was just being filed as either bourbon or just whiskey. And so they said, the folks in Tennessee, they said, you know what, they banded together and they said, you know what, we are distinctly different enough that we shouldn't have to start labeling our product as bourbon or just a whiskey. We should be able to continue to label our product as Tennessee whiskey. And so what they did is they sent some samples into to the government, and they tested them up on Capitol Hill and did some blind tasting and compared them to bourbons and other American whiskeys. And they said, you know what, Tennessee, we agree with you. You're right. We do think that this Lincoln County process does change the viscosity and the flavor profile of the whiskey enough to make it distinctively different. And so what they said is, we don't want to jump too fast. You know how government works. They don't want to move too quick, right? So they said, we don't want to jump in too fast. We're not going to create our own category that is Tennessee whiskey, but we are going to grandfather you in. So instead of ceasing to allow you to call yourself Tennessee whiskey and forcing you to call yourself either bourbon or just whiskey, we are going to grandfather you in now. We're going to allow you to continue to call yourselves Tennessee whiskey, although we are not going to create a specific category for it. And that has stood strong all the way up until the year 2020, where we are now. and this is federally, it stood strong until then. And so this year, the TTB actually did a round of revisions. And one of their revisions that they questioned was, should they add a new category that is specific for Tennessee whiskey? And they actually decided to continue not to. So it is still going to be in a grandfathered in period. So how do we decide the rules and regulations of Tennessee whiskey? Oh, actually, before I go to that, let's show you guys because we go through this discussion all the time, and when you go to the blogs and the whiskey groups, you see people arguing about, oh, is Tennessee whiskey bourbon? Is it not bourbon? No, it's not. Yes, it is. Well, I'm gonna settle it for you all right now.
Thank you.
Tennessee whiskey can be bourbon. Yes, it can. 100%. So, and so if you go to the TTB's website, you can actually look up every single filing of every single bottle of distilled spirit that has been registered with the TTB. Those filings are called colas, and you can actually physically search those colas on the TTB's website. So you can look up every single bottle of Tennessee whiskey out there and see what it got filed as. And so what is very kind of fun to see is, Sailor, if you can pull up this, I sent you some Jack Daniel colas up there. So, and I sent you one where they filed it as a bourbon, and one where they filed it just as a whiskey. And so, so what Jack does with their TTB or cola filings is that if they are just making their mainstream products that are just aged once in one single barrel, they will actually file them with the TTB as bourbon. And then if they do use products that are using any kind of secondary aging, which means they're moved from their original aging barrel into a second aging barrel, then they will file those with the TTB, those products with the TTB as just whiskey, American whiskeys. So which one do we have up here? Is this the?
So I don't know why the photos of the labels didn't. They're just not embedded in this document for some reason.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know why. Which is because you can't actually see the label.
So if you scroll down here, where we can see the product that they were filing, and this one is, oh, if you scroll up a little bit, I think you just went past it.
I think I did.
Okay, so I think this is Jack Daniel number 27. Is that right? There we go. Yep, Jack Daniel. Jack Daniel number 27, Gold Tennessee whiskey. Okay, so this one, when Jack made this product actually goes through a secondary aging, so it sees a second barrel after its initial aging barrel. And so this one they filed, if you scroll down, you can see that they filed it as whiskey. One a little bit further, it will tell you the category. A little bit further. There we go. Okay, right there. Class type, description, whiskey. So this one went through a secondary aging process. So Jack Daniel's just filed this one with the TTB just as whiskey. But when they don't use a secondary aging process, then they file their products with the government agency as bourbon. And so I think the second one that I sent you, Sailor, I think is the Jack Daniel's filing with the TTB or their cola of their 50 ml regular Jack Daniel Black Label, which is probably one of the most common bottles of whiskey on the planet. That's why I picked it out. I mean, how many 50 ml bottles of Jack Daniel Black Label are there on the planet? I mean, just millions. So I picked that one out because it's probably one of the most common bottles on the planet. And you see that they filed this one as bourbon.
Yeah,
bourbon whiskey, there it is.
There you go. Okay, so cleared up, y'all. No need to argue anymore. Tennessee whiskey absolutely can be bourbon. So what is the difference between Tennessee whiskey and bourbon? That is a question that I get asked almost every time I do a presentation. It seems to be something that people are really want to get educated about more than ever before. So you'll see with the TTB, they don't have a classification federally for Tennessee whiskey. So in the Tennessee whiskey industry, we have the choice to file as bourbon, as long as we are following all the rules for bourbon, or can file as whiskey. But what is so cool about Tennessee whiskey is that in 2013, the state of Tennessee actually signed in a bill that for the first time in history outlined the laws of Tennessee whiskey. And when they did that, every distillery in Tennessee from that point forward had to follow those laws of Tennessee whiskey that were signed in by Governor Bill Haslam in 2013. What a guy! Go Bill!
Go Bill!
Yay, Bill!
And yes, and so he signed that in 2013, and Bill 1084, and that outlined the rules of Tennessee whiskey for the first time ever. And so those rules of Tennessee whiskey resembled the rules of bourbon so closely that if you want to be a Tennessee whiskey, and if you're producing Tennessee whiskey now, if you're following all the laws of that bill that went in 2013 to be labeled as Tennessee whiskey, you are also following all the rules for bourbon. So anyone who's labeling themselves as Tennessee whiskey since 2013, you know for a fact that they are also following all the rules that apply to bourbon as well. And so they can, if they choose to be labeled as bourbon. So mystery solved, y'all. Mystery solved.
Thank you.
So,
I won't drop my mic.
Yeah, so it's what is really amazing about that bill 1084, the governor has them signed in 2013. One of the most amazing parts about it for me is the fact that it outlines the Lincoln County process as the quintessential process of Tennessee whiskey. And what is so amazing for us, Uncle Nearest in particular, is that the man, Uncle Nearest Green, he is the man who perfected that charcoal mellowing process, or Lincoln County process as we call it. And when Governor Haslam signed that bill in, he said, essentially, we'll put it up in a second and show you, but he said essentially, if you want to be labeled as Tennessee whiskey from this point forward, you are going to need to follow all the rules that apply to bourbon. Plus, you're going to have to do one extra thing if you want. And that extra thing is you're going to have to use the process that Uncle Nearest Green perfected all those years ago, back in the 1850s. And you're going to have to use all those processes that apply to bourbon, plus Uncle Nearest Green's process that he perfected of filtering the whiskey through charcoal made from maple trees before putting it in the barrel to age. And so for me, at that moment, when that bill was signed in, that was really recognizing Nearest Green on a national, governmental, global level, that he truly is the godfather of Tennessee whiskey. It is the process that he perfected and taught that separates Tennessee whiskey from bourbon, and is the quintessential part of what makes whiskey coming out of that state Tennessee whiskey. So what a beautiful sign and gesture for a man who we know and has always been the godfather of Tennessee whiskey. So you want to, Sailor, you want to pull up that bill, the bill 1084?
The bill? Sure.
Yeah. Let's take a look at it real quick.
Yeah.
So just I'll run through, because it can be confusing, these laws sometimes. So let me run through the laws of bourbon first, because remember I said Tennessee whiskey is bourbon, all the rules of bourbon plus one extra step. And so the easiest way to remember the rules of bourbon are A, B, C, D, E. And those rules being A, bourbon has to be made in America. It doesn't have to be made in Kentucky like a lot of people think, but just so happens about 95% of it, 96% of the world's bourbon supply does come out of the state of Kentucky, but it doesn't have to. There's lots of other bourbon distilleries all around the country. The B, the ABCDE, the B is for the barrel. Bourbon has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel every time. You cannot use a used barrel. You cannot reuse them. It has to be a brand new barrel every time. There is no laws on how long the bourbon has to stay in the barrel. It can stay in there for 1 second if you want it to, and you can label it as bourbon. There's no law on that, but if you want to be labeled as straight bourbon, then it has to be at least 2 years. If it's less than 4 years, then you have to state that on the label. If it's over 4 years in the barrel, then it's really up to you whether you want to state that or not. Like Uncle Nearest, we are aged for much longer than 4 years. Our 1856 is between 9 and 14 years, but we don't state that on the label, and that's a choice that you have after you age for more than 4 years. And then the C, and then the B with the barrels. Once those barrels are used once, then they're sent for lots of other distilled spirits industry use, mainly Canadian whiskey. We've already been dogging on the Canadians today.
I know, right?
Yeah, they're so nice too.
They're so nice.
Know, right?
We're sorry, eh?
Yes. But yeah, we send the bourbon industry send those barrels up to Canada. They age Canadian whiskey in used barrels, and they use them up to 5 or 6 times. They can use those barrels for almost 100 years, and then they send them to down to some rum distilleries, tequila. If you drink reposados or añejos, then those are aged in ex-bourbon barrels.
Likely, you're most
Scotches.
likely, using the experts, one of their finishing or their second aging.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Yeah, and then the C in the ABCDE of bourbon, the C is for corn. Your recipe has to be at least 51% corn. Your other 49% can be whatever grains you feel like. Most people will use rye and malted barley and wheat, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any grains you want. And then the D for distillation, your bourbon has to be distilled to no higher than 160 proof. It has to go in the barrel for aging, no higher than 125 proof, and then it has to go in the bottle for sale at no lower than 80 proof. That's the hardest one to remember. And then your E is for extras. Bourbon cannot have any extras other than pure water. So not like those Canadians adding their neutral grain spirit and their coloring and flavoring. Bourbon cannot add anything other than pure water. It has to be an unadulterated spirit. And so, back to Governor Haslam, the hero of the Tennessee whiskey industry. He signed this bill 1084 in 2013. And what he did here is he outlined what you have to do in your production process from this point forward if you want to be labeled as Tennessee whiskey. And I don't know if it's too small for everyone to read, but if you can read it, you will see that it is incredibly similar to bourbon. Incredibly similar. So essentially what he said is, like I said before, if you want to be labeled as Tennessee whiskey from this point forward, you have to follow all of those laws that have been in effect for bourbon since Lyndon B. Johnson signed them in 1964. Also a good hero of ours in the whiskey industry. And so Governor Haslam said you have to follow all those same laws that Lyndon B. Johnson signed in 1964 for bourbon, except you have to do one extra thing for Tennessee whiskey, and that is you have to use that process that Nearest Green perfected and taught all those years ago, that process being the Lincoln County process, or filtering the whiskey through charcoal made from maple trees before putting it in the barrel to age. And so I think you can see there. So the only other real differences are, whereas bourbon can be made anywhere in America, you'll see that Governor Haslam said that Tennessee whiskey has to be manufactured in Tennessee. And then on one of his sub-documents, he outlined that manufacturing is defined as distilled, aged, and bottled within the state of Tennessee. So you have to distill, age, and bottle within the state of Tennessee. So whereas the ABCD of bourbon, ABCDE of bourbon, we have ABCDEF in Tennessee whiskey, whereas the A, I kind of manipulated the A a little bit because it doesn't have to. It can't be made anywhere in America. It actually has to be manufactured in Tennessee. Like I said, distilled, aged, and bottled within the state of Tennessee. For Tennessee whiskey, the B is exactly the same as bourbon. It has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel. It cannot be used. Once they've been used once, they get sent off to the same place as bourbon barrels get sent off. Then the C for Tennessee whiskey is same as bourbon. Has to be at least 51% corn. The other 49% of your recipe can be anything you choose. Most people use rye and malted barley, but it really can be any grain that you want. The D, same as bourbon again. Can't be distilled higher than 160 proof. Has to go in the barrel for aging at 125 proof or below. Has to go in the bottle for sale at 80 proof or above. And the E, I can add no extras. It can't be adulterated with anything other than water. And that's where bourbon stops. But then Tennessee whiskey, we have the F. And so the F is for filtration. So Tennessee whiskey has to be filtered through charcoal made from maple trees before going in the barrel to age. And that was that process that Nearest Green brought with him through his ancestry from West Africa, perfected in that little town of Lynchburg, Tennessee, and taught to none other than a young Jack Daniel. So yeah, he is really not that process is quintessential to Tennessee whiskey, and it is what defines Tennessee whiskey. But it is all because of Nearest Green. This entire industry wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Nearest Green. Isn't that amazing?
That's so cool.
Amazing. Yes,
I have
it
a
is
question
quite
for
amazing.
you, Richie.
Yeah.
So I'm still a little bit new on my whiskey journey. I was talking to Sailor about this yesterday, but can you talk a little bit more about what exactly that process does for the juice? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
So what is really cool about charcoal is that it kind of acts like a magnet. When you look at it, you think, this is just a lump of coal. What is this going to do? But it's kind of a natural
magnet.
We're losing you.
I didn't think I said.
Don't do this stuff, Richie.
I'm back. I'm here. So it's you look at it and it looks so mundane and so ugly, and it's just a little piece of black stuff that you give to naughty kids in their Christmas stocking. But it's far more than that. It actually acts as kind of a natural magnet, and it draws out a lot of byproducts of distillation that you don't necessarily want in your end product. And so it works. The magnet works in two different ways. One, it works in just a very basic kind of stickiness way, and so that is one part of it that removes a lot of it. But it also, I don't know if you've ever heard if you have activated charcoal. Have you ever heard that term? And so it also kind of it also works ionically as well, and it's able to draw impurities and certain types of molecules out of the distillate through the ionic activation. And so the positive and negative charge of each of these things will be able to draw it out. And very similar to the way that the copper works in an actual still, we'll be able to ionically draw out impurities as well. So the activated charcoal works in a very similar process. And so a lot of the impurities that it will be pulling out will, if you look at, if you go back to like the stickiness aspect of it, that will pull out mainly what we call fatty acids and amino acids. And so the reason that you want to take those out of your finished product is that if you leave a high percentage of fatty and amino acids in your whiskey, it will make the whiskey quite unpleasant to look at. What those fatty and amino acids do in the bottle is that, like I said, they're very sticky. And if you think about any kind of fat, pure fat, pure fat is generally quite a sticky substance. And so in the bottle, if you leave a lot of those fatty and amino acids in the whiskey, they will generally start to stick together over time, and they will create, at first, they'll create kind of a haze within the bottle that isn't very pleasant to look at. And then over time, they will actually create little kind of white clumps inside the whiskey bottle, which is very unpleasant to look at. And one of the biggest negatives of leaving fatty and amino acids in your whiskey is really for general consumers, for folks who are going to look at that bottle and say, oh, wow, this is cloudy, or this has lumps in it. This is a bad product. I need to send this back. And what really enhances that that process of the fatty and amino acids clumping together inside the bottle is temperature. And so generally when we're shipping whiskey overseas, we're putting it in containers, or even just across the country. We're putting it in large containers that can be on the road or on the sea for days or weeks at a time, and can reach very cold temperatures. And that really speeds up the process of those fatty and amino acids clumping together. So imagine this: we are selling our beautiful Uncle Nearest whiskey to our friends in Australia, and the bottles of whiskey sit on a boat for 3 weeks, in really cold temperatures. And by the time all those bottles arrive in Australia, you have a whole container of whiskey where somebody pulls it out and inspects it and says, it went bad while it was shipping here. Look, it's all cloudy. It went bad. It really didn't go bad. But it just that phenomenon, that process of all the fatty amino acids sticking together happened and was accelerated during those lower temperatures. And so before we had a lot of our quick email communication, a lot of the times folks would send their whiskey overseas. If you're thinking about the bigger distilleries like Jim Beam and Jack Daniel's, they would send just entire containers of whiskey to their friends across the world, and then 6 months later, the container would show back up in America, and they've been told, well, this whiskey was bad when it arrived here, so we sent it back, and it wasn't bad at all. It was just that phenomenon that we call flocking in the bottle, which is the clumping together of the fatty and amino acids. So the stickiness part of the Lincoln County process, and the stickiness part of the charcoal, removes a lot of those fatty and amino acids that we don't necessarily want in our finished product. Now, the kind of the activated side, the ionic side of what the activated or sugar maple charcoal does is remove a lot of what we call aldehydes and congeners, and those are byproducts of distillation that, again, you don't necessarily want in your finished product. And so, if anyone's ever heard of the term heads and tails, that is a distillation term where when we run a batch of whiskey, during the process, we'll heat up the what we call the distiller's beer, which is the cooked grains, and then within those fermented distiller's beer, you'll have an alcohol content, and the alcohol will be the first thing to evaporate. So when you heat up that distiller's beer, the first thing to evaporate off will be the alcohols. And so there's a lot of different types of alcohols, or aldehydes and congeners, we call them, that is in that distiller's beer. And so some of the ones that distill at very low temperatures are actually can be quite dangerous for humans. And so if you've ever heard of methanol, this is distilled off at quite a very low temperature. Right. It's very harmful for humans. You don't want to drink that. So as that is evaporating off at a very low temperature, we want to take it in a separate pot essentially and get rid of it, because we don't want that. And then you start, as the temperature goes up, you start to get all different types of alcohols and congeners and aldehydes that are evaporating off. And so some of those you want to keep, some of those you don't want to keep. And so you have to be very, very skilled. This is where the skill of a master distiller comes in, to be able to judge where we want to take off those alcohols that are evaporating at very low temperature, discard them because they are not wanted in the finished product, and then start to collect the alcohols that are evaporating off at certain temperatures that we do want to keep. And then you start to, when you get to really high temperatures, then you start to get more of the alcohols again that you don't want in your finished product. And so you have to be very skilled at picking when to take the early ones and discard them, and when to stop and take the later ones and discard them as well. And so to keep that very middle section of the really good alcohols, the aldehydes, the congeners that you want in your finished product. And so that is a very, very, very hard skill, and it is by no means exact. And so there is always times where you, no matter how precise and how computer driven your operation is, you are always going to have certain aldehydes and certain congeners that will make it into that won't be cut from your head and your tail, and will make it into the heart of your run. And you don't necessarily want those in your finished product. So what the Lincoln County process does is, when you run that distillate, then or your heart collection of your distillate, when you run it through that charcoal made from sugar maple trees, the activation will ionically be able to draw some of those aldehydes and congeners out of the distillate that you don't want in your finished product. So it's essentially a cleansing of the whiskey.
That makes so much sense to me.
The stuff you don't want,
that
and
makes
it
so much
removes it, and it makes it just softer, lighter, smoother, more palatable. It just all round is better. There's nothing it does that doesn't make the whiskey better.
So this is going to sound insane probably, but that makes, when you said that, the activated charcoal, that made so much sense to me, because I'm like into skincare and stuff. And I was like, activated charcoal mask, it removes impurities from your skin. And I was like, okay, that makes so much sense.
And the charcoal pills that you take if you have a hangover or an upset stomach, it really works. It's a funny, I'm watching this show. This is so ridiculous, but it's just a great example. Because years ago, I would have been like, what is he doing? I watched this dumb Netflix show, and Merlin, the magician, the wizard, is on it, and he got shot with a poison arrow, and so he army crawls into this fire and takes a piece of charcoal out and crunches on it and eats it. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's what you want to do when you get shot with a poison arrow. Okay. Okay.
But no, that makes total sense. When he said that, I was like, that makes so much sense to me. Right. I was like, wow, that is exactly what I needed to understand what that process does and how that works.
Whatever you need. Poison arrows, skincare, hangovers.
Exactly. Basically, charcoal, it's the process. Does it for everything. I love it.
Literally for everything.
Right.
That's all you can do with it. And it really does work for hangovers, let me tell you. Those little charcoal pills are genius. That and a Pedialyte, man, you're good to go.
Golden.
Dr. Sailor here to give you the hangover cures.
I love that. Well, thank you for that, Richie. That makes a lot of sense.
I missed yours. For some reason, I lost sound for a second there. I don't know what.
I could see you were struggling. I was
it's Rob Beatty from the Kentucky Black Bourbon gave me bad karma by calling him.
We're gonna blame him.
Poor guy.
It's awful. So, Taylor, the only thing I was going to ask you is for some people, it's really interesting to actually see what the Lincoln County process looks like. And I think I sent you 2 pictures. One of some sugar maple planks.
Slides. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share those.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. All right. So, can you guys see that well enough?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Richie, are you still with us?
Yep, I see it. It's right there.
Okay. Just a second.
Sometimes we got to check on the men in our life to see if they're still around,
Okay, so this is our little, that's probably 2.
Yeah, let's, can you show the planks first?
Sure.
That'd be great. Okay, so here we go. Here is some sugar maple planks before they have been turned into charcoal. And so the way that the process works with this is it's very, very simple. And because it's a process that's been around for so long. So it's and it really hasn't changed much at all. And so what you can see here is that these planks were cut from sugar maple trees. And if you're wondering why sugar maple trees, it's all because of Nearest Green again. And so that farm in Lynchburg, Tennessee, where Nearest was distilling his amazing whiskey back in the late 1800s, that farm was abundant with sugar maple trees. And so it was really just a convenience thing where he took the charcoal from the trees that were all around him. And so that then became quintessential with the process that he taught. And so still today, it uses those trees because of Nearest Green. And so there are some planks at the Dickel Distillery that are some sugar maple planks. And what they're doing here is they're letting them sit outside and essentially dry out because you have to set fire to them to turn them into charcoal. And so you can't do that with wet or green wood, as we call it in the industry. And so they have to let them sit outside, and they made a cute little cabana for their planks at Dickel to make them feel special.
It looks like a roadside attraction.
When they sit them outside,
Where is that in Tennessee?
you know, if you've ever been to Dickel, that little pile there is just a little display pile that they have by their guest house, but the reality looks a lot more like this picture that Sailor's pulled up here, where they let the planks sit outside and essentially dry, so that they can then light them on fire, and then they just light them on fire, set a match on them and light them on fire and let them burn down into charcoal. The pieces of charcoal that they use are can really be anywhere from the size of a dime up to the size of, say, like an iPod, a little earbud case like that.
Okay.
You know, and sometimes you can get bigger ones. You know, sometimes you get little scraps in there too. It's not an exact science. You know, it's nature.
Right.
So generally they're quite small like that. And then they take all of those charcoal pieces and they put them into a giant vat. And so I think we have a picture of one of the vats there. It's kind of difficult to see on this picture, but this vat that they have here, this is 10 feet across. But what you can't see is that I'm actually standing on a second floor here. This vat goes down another floor. So it's actually 19 feet deep and 10 feet wide. So it's quite big. And they filled all of that with those charcoal pieces. And then the process is essentially, you will, Sada, can you pull up that process slide?
Yeah.
Again, sorry, I'm being so bossy, right?
No, please, that's fine. I'm letting you tonight.
So yes, this one right here. So essentially, when you go through the process here, you take your grains, you mill them down into either a grist or a flour, depending on your particular process at your distillery, and then you cook them in the cooker with water, and you'll add the different grains at different temperatures for the cook. And generally the cook is a relatively short process. Maybe, you know, it honestly depends on the technology you have at your distillery. It can be as quick as 5 hours, or it can be up to, you know, eight or nine. It really depends on your level of technology at your distillery. And then you move the cooked grains, which kind of look like a porridge, or as we would say in England, or an oatmeal. And then you move those into your fermenter, and then you add your yeast. Your yeast eats up all those fermentable sugars and turns those into alcohol. So after your fermenter, you're generally looking, again, depends on your distillery, anywhere from 8 to 14% alcohol will come out of the fermenter, and that's about a 3 to 5 day process that they'll let that oatmeal sit in that fermenter with the yeast. The yeast will slowly eat up those sugars over a 3 to 5 day period, turn it into alcohol. After 5 days, the yeast is all died off. And so what you're left with is what we call distiller's beer, which is essentially boozy oatmeal. It's so
It smells so good.
Oh, it's amazing. Yes, it's so good, so good.
It tastes disgusting, but it smells good.
It does. It tastes really nice on day 1. Day 5, not so much.
Yeah, no, I've tasted it.
So then you move that boozy oatmeal into your still on the next step, and you add a bunch of heat to the bottom of it, so that all of the alcohol that's in your boozy oatmeal starts to evaporate off, and the oatmeal is left behind, and just the alcohol that was in there is evaporating off. And like I said, different alcohols evaporate at different temperatures. So those early ones, they're evaporating off at low temperatures. We don't want those. We call those our heads. We want to cut those off and discard them. And then the middle portion, you're looking at about, say, 75 degrees to about, about 120, you say, Sailor, is your heart?
Yeah.
And then, so you want to keep those, and then everything after that is your tails. And you don't necessarily need to discard your tails. You can actually put those into your next batch and reuse those alcohols. But yeah, and then your doubler is your second distillation process. So essentially, after your still distillation, your alcohol content is going to be about, depending on distillery to distillery, it's going to be about 110 to 130 proof. And then your doubler will refine the alcohol content. It will get rid of a little bit more of the stuff you don't want. And so after you go through your doubler, which is essentially your second distillation process, then you're looking at about 120 to 100 and, well, you can go up to 160. So 120 plus on after your doubler. Okay, so then let's jump over to charcoal mellowing, because that's what we're here to talk about. So once you get your then 120 to 160 proof distillate off of your doubler, that is when Tennessee whiskey, Uncle Nearest Green, his process that he perfected and taught, that is when it comes into play. Is before the barrel, but after the distillation. So if you look at a bourbon will have this whole same graph, except they will be missing one portion, and that is the charcoal mellowing portion. And essentially, it will be the same other than that. And so that charcoal mellowing portion, that is Nearest Green's Lincoln County process. And that is where the raw distillate will then get filtered through that giant vat of sugar maple charcoal pieces that we showed you earlier. And so they will really, it's really quite basic. They will just take a pipe and pour the whiskey. It can be distillery to distillery, is all different. Some people will let it just drip very slowly, and some people will pour it all into the vat, and they will have their valve at the bottom of the vat closed off, and so they will pour all the raw distillate into there, let the vat fill up all the way to the top, and let it sit there for a while. And then other people use a technique where they just drip the whiskey slowly over the charcoal, and they will have their valve at the bottom open, and so the whiskey is dripping onto the top and it's dripping out the bottom. So two little bit of different techniques there, but you really use either one. It's not specified how you have to charcoal mellow in Bill 1084 by Bill Haslam, but he just says you have to charcoal mellow, but it doesn't say the technique. So you can really choose to use whatever you want. And then after you've done that, you have removed a really, really high level of the impurities and byproducts of distillation that you don't necessarily want in your finished whiskey. It's a refining process. It's a beautification process. It's what really softens the whiskey, makes it really just all around much more palatable and enjoyable, and much more refined process. And that charcoal mellowing process is obviously makes it harder to make Tennessee whiskey than Kentucky bourbon. It makes it more expensive to make Tennessee whiskey than Kentucky bourbon. It makes it a longer, more time-consuming process to make Tennessee whiskey than Kentucky bourbon. So this is what dispels all of those myths out there that for some reason people think that Tennessee whiskey is inferior to Kentucky bourbon because of the charcoal mellowing process. It is not. It is actually superior, and it is more expensive, and it is a longer, more time-consuming process. And so really, in my opinion, everything about it is way better.
Yes.
A win
yes.
for Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah, it's simply what I tell people, if I have to be quick about it, is it's just better filtered bourbon. That's all. That's it. That's it, but that's it,
Right.
as you described tonight. But it's a simple way to say it's just a premium filtration process. And so it's going to be even better bourbon. And that's when it just clicks and people are like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, see, it's really that simple.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And Seda, we'll have to do round 2 and round 3 to dispel those sour mash myths and those blending myths too. Because trust me, guys out there, I know that a lot of people do associate sour mash with something that they don't like for some reason. I think it's because a lot of people don't like the word sour. So
you know what I think it is, Richie? In all the years that I asked these questions of people, because I really want to know, and it was also like my learning process. So, one whiskey maker can make so many different flavors of whiskey, right? You could just like a winemaker. Oh, I love this Cabernet, but their Merlot is horrific, to my palate, right? So from when I ask people, there is something about the flavor of certain Tennessee whiskeys that it's a specific flavor. And I have that problem too. Like it hits a place in my palate that I don't love it. And so I thought there's a few brands that I didn't care for and I wouldn't touch them. And then I went out or discovered or was given the opportunity to taste some of their single barrels or their barreled in bonds or just longer aged products. Some different mash bills, some the same. And I'm like, oh, I really like this. So I think too, that's where it comes from because it became synonymous because of Jack Daniels being such a, widely recognized global brand.
Yes.
If you don't care for the flavor of a number 7, I think that happened a lot. And I happen to be
100%
in love with the single barrel, right? I have it right here next to I have my Tennessee whiskeys right here. And I love that single barrel, but I tell you guys, I was missing out for so many years because I, just did not educate myself enough. And I thought, I don't care for the number 7, so therefore I'm not going to like their products. And man, is that a mistake. So I think that happens too, because we sell Uncle Nearest, right? How many times do you hear, oh, I don't care for, they'll mention another Tennessee brand. And I'm like, great. Do you not care for pizza because this pizza? It's all these very, very different. But I think that's where that sour mash thing, because they really were the first ones to say sour mash. Am I right?
Yeah,
really
they were the first ones to make it bold front and center on their label.
Right.
And so it became, that term sour mash became synonymously linked with the Jack Daniel brand. And so, like you said, a lot of people have had kind of that bad college early life experience with the number 7 black label, and so they then associate that experience with sour mash because it's the only label that uses it so prominently for so many years, right in front and center on their label.
But I would say,
so yes,
90. You think it's fair to say 97% of American whiskey is using sour mash?
You know what? It's honestly, it's hard to. I don't think I could name 10 American whiskeys right now that use sweet mash process, which is the alternative process to sour mash is sweet mash process. It's two contradicting processes. You can use one or the other. And like I said, but I would say honestly, 90. If you think about the big brands and how many bottles of whiskey they send around the world, it's probably 99.9% of the bottles of American whiskey on the planet are sour mash whiskey.
Craft distilleries were trying out the sweet mash process, and we'll get into this on our next show. But it's we'll do another show.
We got into too deep already.
Yeah. We don't want to blow.
Right. So Seda, before we sign out, did we get any questions today?
So, everybody's just loving this. Comments, this is amazing. Zalika, Diane said, love your question about the filtration. I had no idea. Victoria's with us tonight, and she said she's loving this segment. And Gerald King says this is very educational. And then real quick before we end the evening, the number one question we get, no matter what we're talking about, is 1820. Why can't I find it? Where is it? And let me tell you guys something. It has become the bane of our existence, right? So here's what is real difficult sometimes for people to understand. So most distilleries have an actual single barrel program where they set aside specific single barrels each year, and then they would increase that upon demand. And so there's a day in the year, some do it twice a year, some only once a year, when it's going to be released, and each state will get a certain number of them, which is called an allocation. And then certain maybe bourbon groups or very high, some steakhouses, like you mentioned in the beginning, Richie, can get a barrel allocated once a year or something. That is not how 1820 works for us, because it is just much more special. It is really 1% of our barrels that Sherry Moore, our director of whiskey production, determines are good enough, meaning, whoa, this barrel is beyond. And she goes, okay.
World-class whiskey.
Right.
Every single bottle of 1820 has to be absolutely world-class.
Right.
Can be anything in a context, right? I mean, just stellar. You guys, that is so hard to find. So really, we can only release them when Sherry finds that, and Fawn and everybody involved goes, yes, this is a world-class barrel. And then we can release that barrel. So I know you guys want them, and we appreciate and we love that. Please understand how special it is. We do sell it at our distillery on a regular basis, but our distillery is closed right now, and it's closed for really good reasons. So we are, kind of holding out on the 1820, but it's because our entire distillery has been turned into a mask shipping facility, because we have shipped out hundreds of thousands of masks since the beginning of COVID to frontline workers and essential workers and communities in need who are disproportionately affected, so that we can keep them safe. Hundreds of thousands of masks. So our beautiful distillery team and Olivia, who we always say, thank you, Olivia. Can you imagine how many masks that is, and the shipping and the boxing and receiving and sending out and all of that. So we really are focusing on that and just making sure that we're keeping our distillery staff safe and you guys safe until we have a handle on COVID. So the big bosses will tell us when we can do an online sale. We did one around Christmas last year and broke the internet. So just please stay tuned to our social media, and you will know when we know. And it isn't that it's out there for sale and you just can't find it. It's just that it is so rare and special to get these barrels. So I just wanted to make that. I think I need to record that little PSA and begin every show with that, because it's our number one question, and rightly so. It is, like Richie said, world class, award. But I mean, it cleans the awards up, right? It is phenomenal. So if you get your hands on a bottle, we all believe you should drink whiskey, but this one you might want to take a dram every now and then and hold on to it.
Yes, it's a special occasion whiskey for sure.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
Excited. Is it okay if I don't ever open this one though? That's okay, right?
Don't you dare ever open that one. I will drive there and beat you up. Don't you dare. Although I want to know what it tastes like. There's that too.
Maybe we have an open bottle of the first one round too.
And we each get like 4 droplets of it.
maybe I could dig one out for you.
All right. Love it. Well, thanks, Richie, so much. I still learn from you every time we're together, which is so awesome. And it was also why I wanted to have Zalika on, to see you do your thing as our national brand ambassador. It's just so great. And I know we're also, I miss being out with people, and I miss, hosting tastings and classes, but it's so wonderful that we're able to connect with you who's watching like this. So we appreciate everyone who attends these, and just everybody, please stay safe, and welcome again to the family, Zalika. We are very lucky to have you.
So stoked to be here. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, E.
Thanks, Richie.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, all the beautiful ladies and gents out there. We appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. And
Good
I hope
night,
you learned
everybody.
something today.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I did. Yeah, drink honorably, everybody, and we will see you next time to continue dispelling the myths with Richie Michaels. Cheers,
Cheers.
everyone. That's a perfect thing.
Cheers.
Good
Cheers.
night.